going to get going. And I'm Ron McCabe, and I'm the founder of Evergreen Services. We've done some of the larger horticultural e-commerce sites on the web. And my concept was to really look at where people had gone wrong or where they had trouble. And what I put together here is like a checklist of all the things you need to consider and think about, either before or even after you start a store. One just kind of thing to make you aware of, this leg here went to the right at 90 degrees, so you'll see me kind of leaning up against that chair a lot. It's not, I just have to get off it once in a while. And so I hope you guys can work with that. So I guess who out here has an e-commerce horror story? Anybody? No? Okay. So good. Maybe I caught you before you had that. You could prevent that. So, all right. Well, I'm just going to get to it. So this is kind of the why e-commerce, and the reality is consumers are changing how they shop. We have people that are not, because of the pandemic, no longer comfortable sometimes coming to retail spaces. People want convenience, and this kind of creates some opportunity. One, you're getting people to come in who might not otherwise, and in-store pickup gives you a really good chance to cross-sell your goods to your clients. So the first thing, and this is kind of what I think is really important, is to do a lot of planning and preparation up front. The more planning you do, the less kind of issues you have. And basically, you want to understand who your clients are. And to that regard, in marketing they call it personas. And so you want to go, okay, in my shopping, in my garden center, am I targeting everyone, or what specific audience am I targeting? What are their hopes? Kind of what are things that keep them away? What are their interests? And just in marketing in general, profiling your customers is just a good tool, because then you can develop your marketing tools, including the shopping cart and your content on your website and your marketing material, your physical materials, to really focus in on that client base. And, again, people tend to think about the web and digital separate from their traditional media. And if you're going to do a store launch, you want to have a plan to promote it in both your traditional media as well as on the web. You want to decide if you want to do things like client acquisition, like search engine optimization or advertising, what you're going to do on social media, what advertising you might do in traditional media as well. And then also just kind of think through the whole process. Like, it may seem obvious, but if you don't tell your staff what to do as far as promoting the website online, basically, hold on here. Oh, you got it? If you don't tell somebody what to do and your staff on your team, they may not tell your clients that you've got an online store, or they may not think to do that. And so you really want to think through that process there, because your team can be one of your best promoters, as you've probably seen in other situations. And then obviously, as you execute, you want to have a regular schedule where you look at your promotions and what you're doing, and adjust, and basically evaluate and adjust as you learn more. So this is a pretty important slide from the point of view that, in fact, I actually talked to a lady today that they did a store during the pandemic, and they didn't have the staff to support the extra work to do the e-commerce itself. The other thing I've run into is you need to stage your plants or the things that are sold online so that they're easy to get, but you, at the same time, don't want to take up valuable retail space. And so it's kind of this balancing act. And again, I've actually had people get everything set up and realize they have nowhere to stage their goods. So you really want to think about your flow and process, literally from the greenhouse to where it goes out the door. And I've literally had people run little drills or just figure out what are the physical steps they have to take to get the goods to the client. And if you're going to ship plant material, you want to choose the appropriate things, like you don't want to ship trees, potentially, or you want to certainly plan how you do it. And one of the things that I've had clients do that have been more successful is they've literally thrown the plants, packaged the plants and thrown them around the office. They've shipped it to friends across the country. They've taken the time to really understand what it takes to get the product shipped if you're going to do it. Related to that, a lot of nurseries, if the orders are a certain size, there'll be local delivery, and you've got to think about, okay, what's the minimum price point that you'll do that, or how many orders will you take a day. So basically, I just want you to really understand that before you do the e-commerce store, or as you're doing it, you really want to think about your internal logistics. And what people physically do is more important than the store, because the store is going to enhance whatever issues you have, and you want to catch it before you get a store live. And again, I was just talking to someone about this, and there's no police that says you have to have everything online. And you want to really put some thought into, okay, what are the goods and services that if I bring it online, it's going to be something I can effectively deliver, but also, it's going to attract your target audience and basically complement what you've got. Because one of the values for a garden center is to do in-store pickup, and you want to have the items that will draw them in, or that maybe the client has anxiety about, that they may not come in if they're not sure. So like a lot of times when things are going out during the season, if they can secure the plants before they come in, that lowers their purchase anxiety, because they don't want to come down and not get what they need. But each area has something different that is going to be important, and so it's important to take some time and evaluate that. So this is not the fun part, but you got to think about your accounting and budgets. So you need to really focus on the cost. You need to have the cost planned out, what it's going to cost to set up the store. You've got to have a realistic budget. I have had people get these things started, and they were just kind of winging it, and then they ran out of budget, and they had to wait, type of thing. That's what you don't want to do. And then you related that, this is opening a new business. It's just like opening a new retail storefront. Even though you've got momentum with your current store, a lot of people, what they'll do is they'll be like, oh, well, I'll do my e-commerce store, and my momentum is just going to drag along. And it will to a certain extent. But if you really want to be successful, you really want to think about, how much additional marketing dollars and what is, the reasonable cost per sale. So, what are you willing to spend to get a new client and get extra reach into your marketplace? And then within your business, a lot of times people will just put the cost of the e-commerce store through their standard books, which you can do, that's fine, but you may want to consider setting up in your chart of accounts a way to track it, or, and again, I'm not a CPA or an accountant, but you want to have this as a, tracked, or have it set up as a sub-business or something, so you can relate the cost to the sales. Because you want to do this in a way, obviously, that's profitable, but as you invest to get it set up, that you understand what the costs are and what the benefits are. And then the final thing, unfortunately, and many of you guys know this, so every single online software out there pretty much works with QuickBooks. Unfortunately, in our industry, a lot of people aren't on QuickBooks. They have proprietary point-of-sale systems or different accounting systems outside of that. And so again, this is kind of where people have run into problems. They'll get to the stage of uploading their inventory and they haven't, thought out how to do that. And basically what you want to look for is hopefully the accounting software will export your inventory via what's called a CSV file or Excel file. That's kind of the most common thing. That's kind of the backup. Or we've dealt with proprietary accounting that doesn't do that. And a lot of times what you want to do is have your developer, so essentially what you want to do is export the file and then figure out what the order is versus what QuickBooks looks for is the easiest way to do it. And most competent developers can write a little script, a little converter for you, as long as all the information is provided. So that's kind of how you get around that. So the other is, as you're deciding what store to do, you've got two different ways you can go. You can go hosted or non-hosted. And so a hosted e-commerce would be like Square or Shopify or BigCommerce. My personal favorite is Shopify. And the main reason why is when you do hosted, it's kind of like having Macintosh. It's like super easy and pretty user friendly. And I've literally, like on a Shopify site, had a nephew set up one for himself. It was like one light item, but he did it in like 4 hours. So it's super easy. The downside is it's not super flexible. And so, these sites are good if you just got, a limited number of items you want to put online. I've also had people basically start out with a hosted platform to kind of dip their toe in the water and get started with online, and then switch to what's called a hosted platform. And on the hosted side, that's where you build it out on your web server with your current web host. And the benefit of that is that has the most flexibility. It also has the most options, and it can pretty much accommodate, a lot of really specific things that the hosted side can't. The downside, of course, is that it does have a higher initial cost, and it does have a higher management cost going forward. And so if you're selling enough, it makes total sense. The other thing that hosted does that's important for many of you, because in our industry, we've got thousands of line items sometimes, and the hosted, the self-hosted scale is much larger. The king of this used to be Magento, and that was because it supported so many SKUs. It's also the most expensive option. WooCommerce fixed their bug, so now they scale to several 100,000 line items. And so, kind of my preference in this category is WooCommerce, just because it has, It's the simplest, it's got the lowest cost to manage compared to some of the other options. And then frankly, some of the other platforms kind of require a senior developer, a rocket scientist, and Woo basically works in a way that it's able to work with most developers. Like the biggest base of e-commerce developers out there, because it requires less skill, is Woo. So that's kind of why we recommend that a lot of times. So the other thing kind of related to what else I've been saying is measurement. So on my Moz profile, which is a profile for search engine optimization professionals, I literally say, if you can't measure it, it's not true. And what I found is a lot of times people even have Google Analytics set up, which is the program that measures your activity online, but they'll have like their developer set it up, but they'll never have anyone show them how it works. And why I bring this up and stress it is it's so important. It's like a management tool for you to go into Google Analytics and have someone show you what's going on and basically monitor what's happening on your site. And you can also have whoever's doing your development set up reporting for Google Analytics so that you get a little dashboard with the exact information that you want. Quick side note, so Google's been on the same platform for, I don't know, like a decade. They're doing a major transition right now. They're end-of-lifing the current platform, and they're making everyone go to Google Analytics 4. They're also getting rid of all the data from the current platform. So I would strongly encourage all of you, whether you're e-commerce or not, to get your Google Analytics transition to Google Analytics 4 and something called Tag Manager. That really lets you measure a lot of things within your shopping cart. So it obviously shows your traffic, but it'll let you know how many people are clicking on mobile. It'll let you know if you want your email signups. What I think is a little scary but really cool at the same time is it also really dives into the demographics of the people hitting your website, which gives you kind of a window into who your customers are. And so, it's a really powerful tool, not just for the nerds and the tech heads, but really you as a manager and also for your marketing team, because it tells you, what baseball team they need, what your mix, between male and female, what your age mix, what music, what they're interested in, all this. It's kind of a little scary how much they can pull, but it really gives you a lot of insights into who your customers are, and that's a powerful marketing tool. And then related to that, your Google My Business, which is, or I think they're calling it Google Profile, and Big Places, and Yelp, they all, if you set it up, they'll give you information, demographic information, traffic information. Like for example, Google Profile will tell you how many people look for directions, how many people used it to call you, how many people went to the website, basically what your reach is outside of your website on the web, which is often a good traffic source for your website. So it kind of gives you a view into people as they make the steps to come to you. It gives you an idea of where they're coming from and what their process is. And then I kind of touched on this already. And by the way, I'm trying to kind of hit my 30 minutes, and I've got 17 slides and 30, so I've got to kind of rush through them. But I call this study, adjust, and recover. essentially you want to study all this information as it happens, and you want to adjust, and if there's something going wrong, you want to recover from that and fix it. And so, it's like anything else. If you have the information of what's happening, you can then adjust and do better. And so, even if it's not good information, it's information, and if you use it properly, you can use it to do better. How am I doing with everybody so far? Are you all falling asleep, or is it making sense? All right, good. So this is, I'm probably like way too excited about this, but this is, in my opinion, one of the most important things that you can focus on. So one of our benefits of our industry is the amount of items we have, and that's also one of our challenges when we go online. And whether you have an e-commerce store, in fact, I was talking to a lady this morning about this. She doesn't have e-commerce, she doesn't ever plan to do it, but when she heard about categories, tags, and attributes, she was really excited because they want to put things online, and the problem is, and I'm sure you guys have considered this as well, it's super hard sometimes to find those items if you put it on the website because there's just too much stuff. And so what we do, and a lot of people do, is we have people break things down into categories, tags, and attributes. And once you have this done, then you can have a search where you have all these different knobs, if you will, that your clients can hit to let them narrow down to exactly what they want on your website. So this is kind of a powerful tool, whether you have e-commerce or not, if you want to have a lot of stuff on there. And so what your categories are, like any idea what maybe a category would be? Does anybody have a suggestion?
Perennials.
You're right, perennials. He nailed it. So perennials, and then related to that, annuals. Maybe it's hard goods. Anything it's like your big buckets, it's kind of the big bucket or the top of the funnel. And then tags and attributes are different. So tags are a subcategory to your categories. And the way we determine whether something's a tag or an attribute is if people search for it online. So a real simple way to determine if something's a tag or an attribute is if people are looking for, let's say, deer-resistant plants or pet-safe plants or any of these subcategories that people look for, those all can be attributes. And I mean, not everybody does it this way, but the way I do it is I look at how many searches per month there are for that item. And basically, if there's a lot of searches, it becomes a tag. And if you don't have to write any content, or if it's not something people are going to want to read about, you're going to make it an attribute. And then the attributes are solidly the stuff that nobody's actually searching for, but to find the item they need. So it could be the color, it could be the size, it could be the weight. It could be maybe if people aren't searching hypoallergenic. It could be anything that is a descriptor, but nobody is going to want to read about. So that's how you think of a tag. So I feel like this is a really important slide, whether you're doing e-commerce or not, so your clients can find what they need. Anybody have questions on this? All right, you guys are a smart audience. Okay, going to the dark side here. So one of the things that people don't prepare for, even if they get online, is DDoS attacks. And essentially, it's kind of weird. It's like, if you're successful, it's pretty much inevitable that you're going to start having DDoS attacks. I literally have clients that they call me before I launch the day for, and we like stage everything, and we call the web host, and we let them know, so that if a denial of service attack happens, that's a DDoS attack, there's things you can do to shut it down right away. And so you want to kind of think about that when you do the setup. And the key thing you want to consider is One is your web host is super important. You don't want to have the cheapest one. Like some of you guys may have web hosts where you have to wait 20 minutes to get through to anyone, and then that person doesn't know anything about anything. If you're having e-commerce, you do not want that. Like if you want to have a new level of stress and anxiety, you have a web host like that, and you don't have a good response time, that you need. You want a web host, even if it costs you a few dollars more, that is going to pick up the phone or respond to a text or something right away. And we have clients that get hit all the time, but literally our web host working with us, they've had the attacks squelched before we can even call them. That's what you want, but it's not like what you get all the time. So you want to really think about the web host. And related to that, because of liability, you want to have PCI compliant web hosting and make sure they have it. Because again, if it's PCI compliant and something goes wrong, then that is a protection for you. And it also, that compliance tells you that it's set up in a way that if there is an attack, you're in a good position. And then, related to that, so it's kind of like when you have e-commerce online, you've got a honeypot, and everybody wants that honey. Your attacks and things is going to go up. And again, it's nothing to be afraid of. It's just you need to account for it and prepare for it. And so one of the things, I recommend this anyway, and we do this for all our clients, but with e-commerce, I would now recommend that you go in once a week and do updates. Kind of what's driving that, just so you know, is both China and Russia have $8 to $10 billion annual budgets to do cyber warfare or basically disrupt the American economy. So like if you're wondering where all these hackers are coming from, that's where they're coming from. And they don't really care whether they get through and get money or get something or not. If they screw with your website, from their point of view, they get paid and they won. And so, if you do some simple things and think about this, it's not a big deal. But you do need to kind of set yourself up. So update update things once a week. Those security patches really are something you want. You also want to have what's called DNS protection and caching. And what that is a service that fits outside of the website, and it's like a layer between the outside and your internal functions of the website. And it will provide caching, which will make your site a little faster, which is always a good thing. And it also helps thwart DDoS attacks and other hacking attempts. And the one I like, by the way, is Cloudflare. And the reason why is the base version, which works for 90% of the people out there, is free. So just as an overall, any questions on this last few slides? All right, so related to this, the other common mistake people do is they want to use the same credit card processor that they use for in the store. And every credit card processor in the world is going to tell you that they do online just fine. And the reality is most of them don't. What you want to consider is your cost of integration. So, what tools do they have? What further development repairs do you have to do as you go along? And, what it's going to take to get online. Because a lot of times when you start asking questions like this, they'll be like, oh yeah, we've got this environment. But if you ask the hard questions, they expect your developer to do a bunch of stuff. And so what looks really cheap starts to get expensive. And then related to that is you want a processor that encrypts the information locally and processes it online, and the credit card information is never on your site. Because one of the things that inevitably comes up if you do stuff online, because they've heard of all these break-ins like TransUnion stuff, is if somebody's credit card gets hacked and they happen to be on your site, they're going to be like, oh, I think my credit card got stolen on your site. I'll tell you, it feels pretty good to say, oh yeah, so we don't have any credit card information on our site. It's all processed, online through an encrypted bank, and we never see the credit cards, we never store or touch the credit cards. That is a pretty good feeling, and my clients that I work with tend to like that. And then you also want to kind of look at whether they support Apple Pay and Google Pay, but really I would focus on the Apple Pay. A lot of consumers are using that because of the convenience, and it is actually one of the safest way to buy things online. They really do a good job of protecting people. And then again, it's a business decision. A lot of my clients and people I've worked with, they use deferred payment platforms like Klarna and Affirm. And that platform will let you delay payments over 4 months. And a lot of consumers are using that. And it's about 2% more than a credit card transaction. And so, you can do things like set a minimum and stuff, but what I've experienced, like I've got a client that sells these really cool but expensive exotic plants. And when that shopping cart gets full, over $500, their conversion, and by the way, conversion is somebody that looks at your site, goes through and actually buys something. Their conversion goes up on those bigger transactions. And as you know, in our world, plants are a little addiction and the different supplies. And if you make it easier for people to fuel that addiction, you can benefit. And so it's something to consider. Not everybody wants to do it, but I would highly recommend it as something that you should, at a minimum, consider. And then the final thing is make your store snappy. So for search visibility and for consumer conversion, the faster you can have the store, the better. And so, basically, common thing in our world is we put these huge photos online, even more than the website can even display, and that slows things down. So you want to select the appropriate sizing for your photos and compress them. You want to, after you get everything working, compress the text and code, and then any competent developer is going to use website caching and compression, but not all of them do it out of the gate. You need to sometimes ask them to do it. So that does take a little extra time, but if you can create a nicer experience for your clients, they're going to come back. And then kind of back to the web host, there's kind of web hosts that are really cheap but also really slow, and there's fast web hosts. And you want to consider paying the extra money, and again, we're talking $20 a month. It's not like huge money, but you want to pay the extra money to have a high-speed host. All right, so that's my quick run-through. I hope I didn't go too fast. I'm open to any questions if anybody has any. Yes?
You mentioned with the hosted platforms, a limited amount of SKUs that they can host essentially. How many is limited?
So I would, on hosted for the most part, I would recommend, hundreds at the most. And I usually, when I direct somebody towards hosted, they usually have under 100. And the reason why is that you get more products, it becomes harder to manage, and it also can sometimes get slower. Yes, sir?
You mentioned making sure your point of sale system can work with your e-commerce. Like, which point of sale systems do you find the easiest to kind of maintain inventory and that sort of thing on an e-commerce site?
So it's really it's pretty simple. So first of all, a lot of them can export to like a QuickBooks file, but it's completely bizarre to me. But there's some point of sale systems that don't even export to a CSV or an Excel file. I mean, you can get it to a CSV or an Excel file. You can pretty much write a converter for a few $100s. So if you have those two things, you're in pretty good shape. Obviously, you know, as long as it's compatible in some way with a major platform, it's going to work fine. Or you can export it. I actually had a client that was in love with an accounting system, and so it was running. The developers proudly told me that it ran on Fox Pro, which if you look up Fox Pro, it's like a Wikipedia file that doesn't exist anymore. And we literally spent a month doing the integration. It cost and it was worth it to them, which I think was insane. This is just my opinion, but it cost them several, tens of thousands of dollars. Like that's what you don't want.
I asked that question so not to base you. So a point of sale system like BMX, for example, which is 100% Excel based, is an easy
awesome
transition.
Yeah, I mean, you're going to have to pay somebody to write a converter potentially, but it's not going to be the end of the world. And is that kind of boy, I'm blanking out here. Is that an ERP system?
I'm not 100% positive. We just made the switch over to BMX from Counterpoint start this year.
Okay.
So Counterpoint was like about as anti-Excel as you could possibly
I've heard
be.
nasty things about Counterpoint.
Yeah, like it was awful. And BMX seems to be much, much more capable and adaptable, and the people.
It's probably a lot more snappy.
Yeah, the people who own it are just very quick to make changes, do whatever needs to happen.
Yeah, I mean, in a situation like that, I'd be surprised if they didn't know how to accommodate you.
It sounds like based on what you're saying, it should be a fairly easy kind of.
Yeah, I mean, the worst that we've had to do in a case like that is we basically look at, and you can think about it like an Excel file, and you've got your rows across the top, and your columns across the top, and your rows. And essentially what we have to do is, let's say that the BMX software is XYZ order, and the QuickBooks is an ABC order. You just have to, convert it or flip it around to where it's in the same order.
Which is easy as they have been work with. I'm sure they can probably do that.
I would be surprised if they don't already know how to do it. I mean, it sounds like that's probably an ERP platform, which is the way to go. It's really for a garden center and what you're doing. And again, your probably experience is pretty robust.
And it was actually developed by I don't know if you know BMX, it was actually developed by a garden center owner. He was owned a garden center first. It was in the family, and he was a computer guy that kind of said, our point of sale system stuff, so I could go better when we did.
Yeah, well, some of the ones I've seen, it's not hard. So, well, it's great you got a good solution. Did you have a question, sir?
No, but let me ask the question anyways.
Okay.
I was just thinking, I think a lot of people have an old website that they haven't been updating. Maybe they built it 5 years ago or something. So would the idea be, I'd like to get into e-commerce with Shopify and then just roll up e-commerce and a website together?
Right. Well, you've got a couple options. If it's a WordPress site, there's actually a plugin or extension you can put in that will link Shopify right into your website. Mm-hmm. So you don't necessarily have to create a whole new website. And then the other side is Shopify, depending on how many pages you have on the website, is pretty stinking easy. I really like it from the side of the people using it, because people can learn fairly quickly and it's really easy to use. And then the other thing, a lot of the platforms that are hosted, you have no development options, so if you need something custom, you can't do it. And the development environment there, I believe, is called SOAP. And it doesn't let you do as much stuff as a self-hosted, but it does let you do quite a bit. I've got a friend that runs a company called Wild Zora, and they have these kind of paleo meat and veggie bars, and they've become a national brand. And he's still on, and he only has about 50 SKUs, or 50 part numbers, but he runs this national, brand on Shopify, and it actually holds up to the traffic and does really well. Yes, ma'am?
Do you have examples of e-commerce sites that are by garden centers that are successful and good? Because it's very hard to get photos of plants and information and the sizing, and it changes like on a daily basis if you're putting UPC codes to your product, because this time you got it under that UPC code, next time you're getting it under another UPC code. I've done a lot of research, and I haven't found very many websites that offer e-commerce that are worth going to. So I'm wondering if you have any to suggest that you look at so that we could at least get a handle on what it might look like.
So one that, and again, this is where they took the time to really look at their products and figure out what to sell online and what not to sell online. It's one of my clients, Evergreen Nursery, out of San Leandro. And it's not a garden center, but it's really to show you what you aspirationally can do. One of the most sophisticated websites we've done is Little Prince Plants.
Little Prince?
Yeah, and that, by the way, is an excellent site to look at as far as they did a good job on their categories, tags, and attributes. So you can search on anything against anything. And that is what I would like to aspirationally do with a garden center, but I haven't been able to get anyone to do the planning. So that's where one of the areas where I feel like garden centers are sometimes weak, because the planning isn't done up front to sort through everything. And I think that's the biggest problem with garden center websites. And so what I tend to find with garden centers, the more successful ones, they really focus on what's going to draw their clients online, into the store from online, and that's often a subset. But what I'm not seeing enough is going, okay, how do we make this a good online experience? And how do we help our clients get what they want online, and then figure out the best way to deliver it. And then there are just things that you don't want to put online, like soil that you're getting shipped in. You probably don't want to, if you're going to deliver, ship it, you don't want to obviously ship that. And so that's the other thing is, to me, the key for a garden center to have a good experience is really think long and hard about what you put online and what you don't. And then the other thing you can do is have some things that you do drop ship to them. And by the way, some of your vendors will do the drop shipping for you if you give them the order. And so you don't even have to touch the product to make a profit, which is pretty cool. And then there's also things that you can say, in-store only, like you can only do in-store pickup. And, related to that, a lot of people, what they'll do is, if they do, some garden centers do delivery of product. And what they'll do, though, is say, okay, you've got to have this minimum order for us to do this. And you can even go so far as to say, we're only going to deliver X, Y, and Z items. And you can mark things that they're not for delivery. Does that kind of help? Or?
Yeah, again, I just would really like to see some successful e-commerce sites that...
So why not, I'm a little deer in the headlights, I just blanked out.
Yeah.
But give me your card and just write that down, and I will get get you a list.
Thank you.
No problem. So are there any other questions? Is that the go away button? No?
It's the survey, please.
Oh, thanks. Okay. So I'm willing to stay here later if you guys have questions, but I guess we've hit the edge of our session. I'd appreciate if you guys filled out the survey and let us know what we can do, and like to do a better job for you if we can. I tried my best, of course, to do relevant content for you, but the only way we can dial that in is if we get feedback. So I really appreciate all of you coming, and if you want to ask more questions, I'm going to stay here as long as you need, but otherwise, it was great that you guys came today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You've got another session tomorrow, right, the social media?
Oh yeah, I can do some little shameless promotion. So I'm doing a presentation tomorrow about social media, and what I'm focusing on is most people kind of focus on the fun part, which is the creative side and converting things. But what I'm going to focus on is in a garden center production. So, once you open a social media channel up, it becomes work. And basically we have a process to plan it out and set it up so that as you go forward, it gets easier and easier for you to do. You're welcome.